quiet luxury was never really about clothes. It was a psychological response to instability, almost like an emotional safety blanket. And the row became its most legible symbol via serendipitous timing and the sheer power of celebrity. Quiet luxury rose in popularity at a time where flashy logos and really showing off your wealth became a little bit icky and people had a little bit more disdain for it. We saw the rise and fall of the influencer, a growing disdain for celebrities like the Kardashians, and then we saw the tech billionaires come into the scene, and at the beginning people were a huge fan of these individuals. Sure, people would make fun of Mark Zuckerberg a little bit, but for the most part, when you heard names like Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, the era was respect. People really respected what they had built. They really respected the contributions they had made to the world through their inventions and the economy through their businesses. And a lot of people were really striving to be like them. One time I heard or read in a comment section somewhere on the internet that Americans just love billionaires because we all think that we are temporarily embarrassed rich people, as opposed to somebody who may and probably will not ever make it to their level of wealth. So as we were looking up to these incredibly rich figures, especially in the tech space, we noticed that they were wearing plain black t-shirts, no logos. We were admiring Steve Jobs and his black turtleneck, blue jeans uniform. We were looking at Mark Zuckerberg and his black t-shirts where there would be a tiny little tag on it that would harken back to a brand and let you know that the shirt costed like thousands of dollars, but not because it had a giant Louis Vuitton logo on it, but it was just because it was a brand that leaned on, if you know, marketing. And we could start to see people create this separation between old money and new money, the good type of wealth that was built off of your brain power and some invention versus the bad type of wealth, which was built off of influencing or just being a socialite. And we saw the rise of Sophia Richie and how she rebranded and transformed herself. There were so many cultural moments that culminated into this societal energy that allowed the row to just skyrocket. The truth is that quiet luxury was never actually about refinement or taste. It was about not being mistaken as the wrong type of rich. Now, at the time that the row was coming into its power and establishing itself in society, there were many other brands that were doing and leaning into this quiet luxury aesthetic. But what differentiated the row is that they didn't just lean into this moment aesthetically, but they also leaned into it through their brand and marketing strategy. Now, if you know anything about me, you know that this is my bread and butter, so let's get nerdy for like a minute here about this. Past the minimalist aesthetics, the row did very little traditional marketing. You wouldn't have seen ads on TV. You wouldn't have even seen them doing much influencer gifting or seeding. I think that the little bit of seeding that they did do was for like A-list and B-list celebrities, which nowadays is a little bit more rare as people are oftentimes gifting influencers and more everyday people who have built their brands on being relatable. But the row kept it at a celebrity level. Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen have also talked at great length about wanting to separate their names from the brand and wanting it to stand on its own. I'm not sure how true that is because I still think that if the row was not started by this celebrity duo, it may not have risen to the fame that it did, at least not in the timing that it did. However, they did not plaster their name all over it, like think Jessica Simpson shoes or even Rare Beauty, where it's so obvious that Selena Gomez is the owner, or we look at Rhode, right? It's not one of those celebrity brands that's so deeply tied to the personal branding of the founders. It's more so just this beautiful brand that happens to be owned and operated by this child star duo. This is in perfect alignment with their minimalist and quiet luxury brand strategy that they were doing, not only in the style of their clothes, but just in how their brand and business operated. Everything they did was stealthy. Everything they did was about being in an in-group where if you know, you know, right? If you know that the row is by the Olsen twins, then you know that. But if you are not in the type of group who is having the budget to shop the row items and even know and be in conversation about it, then you may not ever discover that it's the Olsen print twins that run the brand, because you're just not in that level of conversation. Of course, it's different now, because in 2026, the row is so famous that I think most people know the lore behind the brand. But when it first came out, it probably was not well known amongst more middle class people, and it was only the ultra wealthy that knew the backstory of the business. Now, even the logo design, the web design, when they do marketing and fashion shows and spaces and have storefronts or sections in high-end stores like Saks and Bergdorf Goodman, everything about their branding is super refined, super restrained and held back. We're looking at simple sans serif fonts. We're looking at a lot of white, black, and beige. We're looking at everything neutral across the board. It signals what the brand is about, and the entire thing feels like a whisper. It feels monastic. It feels incredibly restrained, and there's this certain type of confidence to not having to shout, not having to lean into the glitz and glamour, and being somebody like an Olsen twin where you just know that if you release a clothing brand and you price your jackets at $10,000, people are gonna buy it because you are who you are, and they just know it. And that is the cool factor behind a quiet luxury brand, and why it worked so well for the row, especially considering the context that they came up in, which we just talked about. But what goes up must come down. Now, one of the biggest videos on my channel is about the row and the recent sample sale. And if you haven't seen that before, you absolutely should go and watch it after you're completed this video. But it's been fascinating to read all of the comments and the opinions and thoughts about the row. There are a few fans in the comment section that seem to adore the brand and think that it's absolutely worth the pricing that they are asking for, but the vast majority of people seemed to be opposed to the row, opposed to their price point, opposed to the sample sale and the recent cultural moment. And I believe that this is because quiet luxury has stopped being a symbol of discernment and now feels a little bit more performative. I've said several times on this channel that price has stopped being a proxy for quality, and that is really challenging for people, especially at a time like this where more and more people are feeling strained economically. So if you're not in that top 10% of society, or honestly even 1% of society, you're probably experiencing quite an economic recession, and you are being heavily influenced by inflation and the rising cost of living and the fact that your salary or your business income is not quite keeping up with the pace that your cost of living is increasing. This creates a perfect storm for resentment for any brands who are really heavily leaning on signaling, on perception, on the cool factor to command their pricing, as opposed to more tangible things like quality. I strongly believe that there always needs to be a mix of both, that your brand perception has to cue luxury in order to command a higher price point, and also that you should be giving excellence through your products or services in some way so that your customer feels like they will spare no expense in order to get the best. And it needs to be clear through both your perception and word of mouth and reputation and all of the things that go into branding that you are the best. However, I'm not so sure that the row is nailing it on all counts with this. Some of their materiality is polyester, and there's arguments about high performance polyester versus regular polyester and whether polyester is all bad as a material. But when it really comes down to it, people are really heavily scrutinizing and putting a magnifying glass to whether they are paying for legitimately superior quality clothing, or if they're just paying for the knowledge that they are wearing the row. Because to be honest, most people That's the point of quiet luxury. Could probably not tell a Row jacket apart from a Uniqlo jacket as you're walking down the street. So it becomes a question of how important is it to you to signal to other fashion lovers or other wealthy people that you can afford the Row, or how important is it to you that you're just getting really great quality items? Of course, these are all very personal questions, and fashion and personal finance and all of those things are up to you. And I think that the Row sells some really beautiful clothing, and I love that some people love them. However, I completely understand the other side of the argument where people just feel like it's not worth it. They are laughing at the entire situation, or they might feel actually angry and resentful about it. But where I am concerned is if you are a brand leader or a brand strategist or a founder of a different company, and I want to talk directly to those types of people for the next 30 seconds. It is becoming more essential than ever to provide and communicate quality if you're looking to become a luxury brand and command a premium price point. Your customers are going to demand it, and I think it's simply the right thing to do as a business. And in that same breath, I want to say it is equally as important to ensure that you understand human psychology, you understand consumer psychology, and you know how to pull the right levers to build an entire immersive world around your brand that makes the experience feel luxurious from the moment that somebody discovers you on Instagram to checkout, to wearing your product or experiencing your services or being in your place of hospitality. Everything needs to be thought through. Everything needs to be strategic from start to finish in order to earn your place within the luxury market. My name's Tosin, and I'm the founding principal of Atelier Oluwatosin. Thank you so much for watching this video. I would love for you to subscribe for more of these types of content, more breakdowns about luxury branding, about what's happening in culture, about economics, about visual design. And if you are building something like this and you're watching these videos to be able to apply it directly to your organization, I would love to have a conversation with you. Reach out, let's find time to talk, and let's go through your specific. I'll see you really soon. Take care.